A year has passed since the launch of the 7900 XTX and the 4080. Let's pit these two GPUs head to head and see which one is better at 4K and 1440p, as since their launch, multiple drivers have been released with performance improvements. I will be benchmarking ray tracing and non-ray tracing game and showing all the graphics settings before every side-by-side comparison. The system configuration with the undervolting settings are listed in the description. I also added timestamps to mark in the timeline each game's graphics setting and side-by-side comparison, as this is going to be a long one, but I hope you stay with me and don't skip through this video. And also, consider subscribing to the channel, as most of you are not subscribed yet, and this will help a lot a small channel like this one. Now, let's jump to the comparison. First, pure Raster games. In this game, the 7900 XTX bested the 4080 with 4K averages of 108 and 1% lows of 89.6, while the RTX 4080 had 97.8 with 1% lows of 65. You can see as well the 1440p 1% lows are much better for the 7900 XTX. In Total War Pharoh, the GPUs are basically tied, but the 4080 has a minor advantage when it comes to the 1% lows. The 4080 manages a 1% low of 30.9 at 4K, while the 7900 XTX 29.2. We can also observe that at 1440p, the 1% low for the 4080 stand at 65.9, while the 7900 XTX stand at 59.9. In this game, both cards under-deliver at 4K. In The Last of Us Part 1, the 7900 XTX delivers the better experience. The 4K averages stand at 70.7, while the 1% lows at 62.1, while the 4080 managed the 55.5 averages with 1% lows of 45.9. Looking at the 1440p results, we can see that the 7900 XTX delivers averages of around 117 frames per second, while the 4080 99. Both cards deliver a good experience, but the 7900 XTX has the edge. Both cards deliver good performance in life of P, but the 7900 XTX enjoys a small advantage when it comes to the 1% lows. At 4K, the 4080 has 1% lows of 79.4, while the 7900 XTX 116.6. At 1440p, maybe CPU bottleneck, as the averages are the same. There is a known issue with Revisional Statistics and Remnant 2, so I had to use for the AMD card the AMD overlay, but just to capture the frame rates on screen. When looking at the 4K results, we see the AMD card leading with 77.8 and 65.3 1% lows, while the Nvidia card managed 59.9 and 49.6. When it comes to 1440p, the AMD card maintains its lead with 1% lows of 105.6, while the Nvidia card managed 87.8. As Horizon Zero Dawn is an older game, both cards perform well. The 7900 XTX leads here with averages at 4K around 132 and 1% lows around 103, while the Nvidia card delivers averages of around 123 with 1% lows around 86. When it comes to 1440p, both cards average are above 200 FPS with 1% lows sitting around 140 for the Nvidia card and 150 for the AMD card. When it comes to Starfield, as it is an AMD sponsored title, we see the 7900 XTX taking a lead here. The AMD card delivers averages of 78 frames per second, while the 4080 68.7 at 4K, with 1% lows of 65.5 and 57.2. At 1440p, the AMD card delivers averages around 114, with 1% lows around 89, while the Nvidia card 100 frames with 77 1% lows. Focusing on 4K in the games that don't have RT implemented, the 7900 XTX leads the 4080 with only one outlier, that one being Total War Pharoh. Both deliver a below 60 FPS experience without being able to tell them apart, while the AMD card delivered an above 60 FPS experience in the other games tested so far, at least in the areas tested by me. The 4080 failed to do so into other games, The Last of Us Part 1, an AMD sponsored title, and in Remnant 2, an Unreal 5 engine game. From the looks of it, when it comes to Raster gaming and 4K, the 7900 XTX is a better card, at least when compared to the 4080. Let's move to games that have implemented ray tracing. Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora is another AMD sponsored title, but here the tables are turned, with the RTX 4080 leading the 7900 XTX. When it comes to 4K averages, the RTX delivers 56.9, while the AMD card 51.9, and the 1% lows stand at 45.8, and for the AMD card 40.3. Looking at 1440p, the Nvidia card leads again with averages around 87, while the AMD card around 77 and 1% lows of 64.4, with the AMD card sitting at 56.6, 1% lows. Lords of the Fallen, another Unreal Engine 5 game, seems to perform the same on both cards at 4K, with the AMD card enjoying a 2 frame per second advantage, with averages of 54 against 52 and 1% lows of 45.3 against 43.1 for the Nvidia card. Spider-Man Remastered, PlayStation 5 exclusive, ported to PC, runs fine on both cards. At 4K, both cards are neck and neck, with the AMD card delivering 84.1 and 62.7, while the Nvidia card 82.1 and 59.5. Moving to the 1440p results, we see the Nvidia card managing a small lead with 107.8 average frame rates, while the AMD card delivered 101 and 68.8 frames per second when it comes to 1% lows, and 65.4 for the AMD card. I want to start by saying that the Plague Tale Requiem looks amazing, especially so at 4K. At launch, this game didn't feature any ray tracing, but with a later patch, it added ray trace shadows. The 4080 performs better than the 7900 XTX at 4K and 1440p, especially when it comes to the 1% lows. At 4K, the 4080 averages 54.5, while the AMD card 51.3, with 1% lows 43.6, and the AMD card 32.3. At 1440p, the Nvidia card delivers 95.3 frames per second when it comes to averages, while the AMD card 85 with 1% lows of 59.4 and 42.8 for the AMD card. In this game, the 4080 crushes the 7900 XTX. At 4K, the Nvidia card averages 42.2, while the AMD card 25.9, with 1% lows 27 when it comes to the Nvidia card and 12.9 for the AMD card. At 1440p, the 4080 manages averages of 77.9, while the AMD card 49.2 and 1% lows of 54.5 against 29.9. Resident Evil 4 was previously bundled with AMD cards, so this is why the 7900 XTX probably performs better than the 4080 here. At 4K and 1440p we see the AMD card leading. Starting into 4K results, we see averages of 110.6 for the AMD card and 99.5 for the Nvidia card, with 94.9 and 86.2 1% lows. Moving on to 1440p, the AMD card leads with 164.1, while the Nvidia card delivers 159.4 and 1% lows of 138.4 against 127.4. I think that Watch Dogs Legions, a game released in late 2020, is an unoptimized game as it runs quite bad on current gen hardware. Looking at the 4K results, we see both of the cards delivering below 50 FPS when it comes to the averages, with the AMD card managing 42.5 average frame rates with 24.51% lows, and the Nvidia card 47.1 and 40.1. At 1440p, the 7900 XTX struggles again when it comes to the 1% lows with 43.4 against 63.9 for the Nvidia card. In Cyberpunk 2077, the 4080 obliterates the 7900 XTX, but this is normal as this game is built around Nvidia tech. Looking at the 4K result using upscaling balanced, the 4080 leads with 64.5, while the 7900 XTX reaches 45.9, with 1% lows of 53.3 for the Nvidia card and 35.6 for the AMD card. At 1440p, I used upscaling set to quality, and the Nvidia card leads with 99.3, while the AMD card 68.7 averages with 1% lows of 79.4 and 56.4. Hogwarts Legacy is still not fixed, has a lot of issues. Looking at the 4K results, we see the 4080 leading with averages of 33.9 against 29.8 for the AMD card, while the 1% lows stood at 1.6, because in this year I had a lot of stutters and freezes with these drivers, compared to 13.9 for the 7900 XTX, which behaved better, at least at 4K. The same behavior was observed at 1440p. On the screen it can be seen that the frame time graph looks a lot better for the AMD card than the Nvidia card. When it comes to path tracing, the AMD card struggles a lot. The 4080 can manage more frames using upscaling set to quality, while the 7900 XTX with balanced. Looking at the 4K results, we can see the 4080 averaging 41.5 frames, while the AMD card managed 33.9 with 32.41% lows for the Nvidia card and 14.9 for the AMD card. When it comes to 1440p, we can see averages of 49.6 for the AMD card and 56.7 for the Nvidia card, with 1% lows of 42.3 for the 4080 and 28.5 for the 7900 XTX. Path tracing is really demanding, especially for AMD cards. In more demanding areas, like the one following on the screen, with trees, where we have more rays of light passing through the leaves, the performance gap widens even more.
My sweets. Now why'd you go and...
Looking at the 4K results for ray tracing or path tracing games, we can see a trend here. And that trend is that most games, including some with upscaling, can't pass an average of 60 FPS, which is a bit disappointing for such expensive cards. I think 4K and path tracing or ray tracing don't go hand in hand, at least when it comes to FPS, as the performance drop-off is huge. To benefit from all the eye candy that a ray tracing game can offer, you need upscaling. Unfortunately, I think this will be the trend from now on. I didn't add Warzone and Fortnite to the Raster games, as in these ones I'm not using max settings. When it comes to Warzone or Call of Duty, the AMD cards tend to perform better than the Nvidia cards. And here, the 7900 XTX manages 298.3 average frames per second at 1440p, while the Nvidia card, the 4080, 266.7. The 1% lows, though, are evenly matched. In Fortnite, using DirectX 11, we see the AMD card, the 7900 XTX, leading the 4080, with average frame rates of 254.9, with the 4080 averaging 221.4 frames per second. When it comes to 1% lows, the AMD card leads again. When it comes to the AMD drivers, I didn't encounter any issues. I can edit videos and use it for gaming without any errors. And maybe because I disable everything that is enabled by default in Adrenalin. When it comes to Nvidia drivers, in some games I encountered crashes, like Hogwarts Legacy here or Dead Space, but this is far in between. Also, for my use case, for writing code, the Nvidia drivers are okay in Linux Pandora. I wanted to mention this as in general people think that Nvidia cards don't have good support in Linux. So, after 1 year, where do these cards stand? As expected, the 4080 tends to be better at ray tracing games, while the 7900 XTX tends to lead in pure raster games. In general, nothing has changed since their launch. When looking at the prices right now, the 7900 XTX, at least the entry-level cards, hover around 1000 euros, with occasional dips to as low as 950 here in Spain. Prices for the 4080 still hover around 1200 euros, with the lowest offer sitting at around 1150 euros in the same shop. Looking at the Steam GPU standings for November 2023, we see the 4080 trailing the 1490 by 0.21%. The 4090 is the most expensive card in Nvidia's lineup so far. Let's see where the 7900 XTX stands, as it's cheaper. Well, the cheaper card has the smallest market share, at least according to Steam. This shows that the rumors that the 4080 was not selling well were most likely market dependent. So, which one is better now as the 4090 prices have surged, reaching 2000 euros here in Spain, up from the 1600 euro prices that I saw during the summer? If the price difference is 150 euros or more, the 7900 XTX seems to be the better card, as both cards require upscaling at 4K when using ray tracing. If it's less, I would choose the 4080 as it has DLSS and this option is integrated in more games. But I'm curious to see what you think, so let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit the thumbs up button and consider subscribing to the channel. Hope to see you all in the next one. Take care.